everyone. Thank you for joining me here for another Facebook Live. I'm back after taking a week off for a little rest and relaxation, and I hope everyone is ready to dive back into our weekly Facebook Live. So today we're going to be talking about why dieting is like the absolute worst thing that we can possibly do if you're struggling with binge eating. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Alexis Conason. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm in private practice here in New York City, and I specialize in treating people with different types of overeating issues, including patterns of chronic dieting, falling on the wagon, being on the wagon, then falling off, and a lot of issues with just not feeling good about our bodies and by extension really not feeling good about ourselves overall. I'm also the founder of the Anti-Diet Plan, which is a 6-week mindfulness-based program to help us resolve our issues with food and develop a more peaceful and harmonious relationship with food and our bodies. And again, ultimately, I think this really changes the way that we relate to ourselves. That's why it's such a foundational shift. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can learn more about my signature program at theantidietplan.com. You can also sign up for a free 5-day challenge at my website, drconason.com. And any questions, feel free to email me. So I want to dive right in to why dieting is so problematic, especially if we're struggling with binge eating disorder or any kind of binge eating or loss of control eating or even just kind of like a conflicted relationship with food. I mean, honestly, I think dieting is probably one of the worst things we could do, period, for our health and well-being. It's linked with so many problematic outcomes, but especially if we're struggling with binge eating. And this is problematic because what we find is like a lot of the treatments for binge eating include restriction, like not the informed treatments that I would recommend, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. And a lot of people feel that if they're feeling out of control with their food, the solution is to try to create rules and regulations and restrictions and a plan to try to regain a sense of control around their eating. But what most people find is that the more rules that they put in place, the more that they tend to break those rules and the more out of control that our eating feels. So ironically, binge dieting or putting any kinds of rules or restrictions around food is like the absolute worst thing that you can do if you're struggling with binge eating. And here's why. There's a ton of research that shows that binge eating is actually triggered by restriction. So another way to put this is that binge eating is kind of our body's natural response to being told that certain foods are off limits, that certain foods are not permissible, that we have to restrict or restrain what we're eating. So if anyone's ever been on a diet, they might have had this experience where, they want the burger and fries, but feel that that's not permissible on the diet plan, so they have the salad instead. And, they kind of go through the day and they're still thinking, as lunch passes, they're still thinking about that burger and fries that they really had, but trying to be virtuous and trying to be good and stick to the plan and have the salad or whatever is permitted on the plan. Well, anyone who's ever been on a diet can tell you that it's only a matter of time before you give in to those cravings. And again, research shows that like upwards of 70% of people who are on a diet will eventually give in to those cravings, and dieters tend to experience cravings that are more extreme, stronger, and longer lasting than people who are not on a diet. So this can feel really preoccupying. We get like obsessed with that burger that we're not supposed to have. And eventually we do eat it and we tend to feel very out of control. And then we get into the screw it mentality. Okay, I've blown it, I've gone off my diet now, I might as well go all out. I've had the burger, had the fries, I might as well have the piece of cake with it, I might as well have 2 pieces, I might as well have a slice of pizza too. And we end up eating all these other foods that we may or may not even want, but just kind of feeling like here's our chance, we're off the diet now. And that can trigger a binge in and of itself. So there's like a ton of research that shows that any kind of restriction or dieting will actually increase increase our likelihood of having a binge episode. So if you are struggling with binge eating, the last thing you want to do is do anything that is going to increase the likelihood that your symptoms are going to get worse. Like if you were struggling with, I don't know, any kind of, medical condition, and you knew that there were certain behaviors that were going to flare up that condition, you'd probably want to avoid them. So same goes with dieting. If you're struggling with any kind of binge eating, definitely want to avoid dieting, because it's going to make that binge eating feel much more out of control and much more severe. And it's going to keep us caught in that cycle. So, in like almost all cases of people who are struggling with binge eating, there's some kind of restriction involved. And that restriction might be being on a diet. It might be rules around food, judgments around food, whether or not we're following them. Now, I work with a lot of people who say, no, I'm not doing any kind of restriction. I'm eating everything. But what I often find is that when I really start talking to people, that there is psychological restriction, there's judgment around food. There's a sense that, yeah, I'm going to eat that, but it's from a place of screw it, I'm going to be bad today, I'm going to eat that. But there's rules around food, and there's a sense that we shouldn't be eating certain things, and there's judgment and guilt and shame and all of those emotions that go along with having rules and restrictions around food. So even if we're not actually on a diet, even just having that diet mentality is going to increase our risk of binge eating. So that is some of the reasons that I think that dieting is like the absolute worst thing that we can do. And it's really unfortunate because, again, like I said, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think that often what we hear, and if you're struggling with binge eating, I would love to hear what your experience has been like. But, often we're told, and by well-meaning friends, family, even medical professionals, that if we're feeling, if we're overeating, because binge eating, some people think binge eating is just about overeating, which is anything but if you're struggling with, binge eating, people think of it as overeating and say, well, you just have to eat less. You just have to be stronger with yourself. You have to be more motivated, more disciplined, have more willpower, and just try to follow this plan. So there's actually, again, if you look at the research studies, they show that there are a much, much higher statistically, higher percentage than average of people with binge eating who present in a weight loss program, like a diet program, something like Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or whatever. You go into a Weight Watchers meeting, you are going to find a disproportional number of people struggling with binge eating. And like I said, that's the worst place that you could be if you're struggling with binge eating. So what I do hope is that if you're struggling with binge eating, that you start to explore some alternative approaches, that you understand that dieting is not the answer. In fact, dieting is going to make your binge eating feel much worse and much more out of control. And start to explore some of the treatments that have been shown to actually be effective in managing binge eating, such as mindful eating and weight-inclusive perspectives that focus on body acceptance and really starting to heal our relationship with food and our body. Because if we're dieting, we're just keeping that conflict alive. We're keeping that conflict that we feel towards ourselves, towards our body, very much alive. And if we can get off of that dieting roller coaster and start to actually have compassion for ourselves and try to come to peace with ourselves as we are right now. And mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools I've found to help people do that. Then you can start to understand really what we want, when we want it in terms of food, as well as other needs that our body has, and start to really honor and meet those needs. And that is going to be much, much more satisfying than any kind of diet plan. And, that is what research is showing is the more effective ways of treating binge eating is through weight inclusive, health at every size oriented, non-dieting programs that focus on mindfulness, on things like intuitive eating, really starting to get to know our bodies, come back home to our bodies, often for the first time, and, develop that more peaceful relationship with food. And that is what's going to help you out of the turmoil and chaos that we often think dieting is going to be the answer to, but dieting's not. It's not the answer. And like I said, there's a lot of evidence out there showing that it's just going to make us feel a lot worse, a lot more out of control, and a lot more entrenched in the cycle. So if you're looking to learn more, there's lots of resources out there. You can check out my free 5-day mindful eating, the anti-diet plan challenge, to kind of get your feet wet a little bit and what this approach is all about. There's also so many wonderful books. I love the intuitive eating book. That's like the classic that a lot of this model is based off of. Health at Every Size book. There's a more recent one called Body Respect that came out. I highly recommend. And I think I've shared resources on my website before. So if you're interested in learning more, I hope you'll explore this area. It is so much more powerful and so much more effective than just doing the same old thing that doesn't work over and over and over again. And again, I think we also have to be really wary of advice that we get telling us that dieting is the answer. And I hear this all the time from doctors, physicians, therapists. We're not immune to the weight bias that is so entrenched in our culture. So, if your doctor is telling you that the best treatment for binge eating is to go to Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers, really we have to question that, and we have to look for the evidence. We have to ask to see the research, and I hope that you will take it on yourself to explore some of these alternative means of treatment that really have been shown to be effective. So thank you everybody for joining me. I'm so happy to see so many people here live. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can get me by email, info@drconniston.com. Again, you can check out my free 5-day challenge at my website, drconniston.com. You can find me on social media, on Instagram, I'm at the Anti-Diet Plan, Twitter at Conniston Psy.D, and Facebook, Alexis Conniston Psy.D. I look forward to connecting with you, and I'll see everyone next week. Bye, have a good week.